In the world of comedy, rivalries are not new, but few have lasted as long or been as intense as the feud between Chevy Chase and Bill Murray. Both men were stars of Saturday Night Live SNL, a show famous for its sharp sketches and legendary comedians. While most people assumed the conflict was just part of show business, the truth ran much deeper. The story began in the 1970s, when Chase had already made his mark as the breakout star of SNL's first season. He became a household name almost overnight, with his witty delivery on Weekend Update and his natural stage presence. Hollywood quickly came calling, and Chase left SNL to focus on movies. Around that time, Bill Murray joined the cast, stepping into the space Chase had left behind. But Murray's style was very different. He was unpredictable, edgy, and often said things without a filter. This difference created tension that grew over the years. Their infamous backstage fight in 1978 became a moment comedy fans still talk about, but the bad feelings went far beyond one argument. Chase, coming from a privileged background, carried a mix of confidence and arrogance that rubbed people the wrong way. Murray, meanwhile, had fought harder to reach success and resented anyone who seemed to get things easily. When the two collided, it wasn't just about comedy, it was about ego, identity, and respect. To understand why Chevy Chase carried so much resentment, it helps to look at his early life. Born Cornelius Crane Chase in 1943, he came from a wealthy family tied to the Crane plumbing fortune. His father was an editor, and his mother was a pianist, giving him a cultured background. On the surface, it might have seemed like a comfortable childhood. But in reality, Chase faced instability and emotional pain. His parents divorced when he was young, and he later said that he suffered both emotional and physical abuse from his mother and stepfather. This difficult upbringing shaped his sharp humor, which often came with a biting edge. In school, Chase had a reputation as both funny and mischievous, known for pulling outrageous pranks that sometimes crossed the line. After graduating from Bard College with an English degree, he drifted toward entertainment, first through music before finally settling into comedy. His quick wit and sarcastic charm made him stand out. By the time he joined SNL in 1975, he was ready to become a star. Chase's success came fast, but so did his reputation for being difficult. Colleagues often found him arrogant, sometimes even cruel with his jokes. Still, audiences loved him, and he became the first real star to emerge from SNL. This mix of talent, ego, and insecurity played a huge role in how he later clashed with Bill Murray. Bill Murray's rise to fame looked very different from Chevy Chase's. Born in a large Irish Catholic family in a Chicago suburb, Murray grew up with 8 siblings. Money was tight, and his childhood was far from glamorous. He had a rebellious streak early on, often getting into trouble. At one point, he was even arrested at the airport for trying to smuggle marijuana. His academic life was rocky too. He dropped out of Regis University after just 1 year. Unlike Chase, who had access to connections and privilege, Murray had to fight for every chance. His first break came when he joined the National Lampoon Radio Hour, working alongside other young comedians who would later become household names. This eventually led him to SNL in 1977, where he replaced Chevy Chase. But stepping into Chase's shoes was no easy task. Fans of the show were already attached to Chase's style, and critics were harsh on Murray at first. Some said he lacked Chase's natural charm and seemed too angry on screen. But Murray leaned into his unique strengths, his unpredictable energy, and his ability to improvise. Soon he was creating unforgettable characters and sketches that showed he wasn't just a replacement, but a comedy powerhouse in his own right. His big screen success in movies like Meatballs, Stripes, and eventually Ghostbusters only solidified his place in Hollywood. Still, that chip on his shoulder, the feeling that he had been compared to Chase and judged against him, lingered in the background and fueled much of the tension between them. The tension finally boiled over. On February 18, 1978, Chevy Chase returned to SNL as a guest host after leaving the cast 2 years earlier. By then, Murray had established himself on the show, but the bad blood between the two was ready to explode. According to witnesses, the atmosphere in the studio was tense all week. Murray bristled whenever Chase spoke, and Chase made snide remarks that rubbed Murray the wrong way. Things came to a head backstage shortly before the live show. Accounts of what happened vary, but most agree that it started with an exchange of insults. Murray allegedly called Chase a medium talent who owed his career to others. Chase fired back with deeply personal remarks about Murray's looks, background, and even his family. The insults cut so deep that both men lost control. A physical scuffle broke out, with crew members and cast rushing to separate them. Chase walked away with a split lip, while Murray had scratches on his face. But the real wounds were not visible. They were emotional, and they left scars that would last for decades. The fight became legendary, not just because two stars had clashed, but because it revealed how fragile egos and unresolved resentments could tear apart even the brightest comedians. Despite the chaos backstage, both men went on to perform during the live broadcast as if nothing had happened. To the audience at home, the show was smooth and funny. But those behind the scenes never forgot the explosion they had just witnessed. Most celebrity feuds fade with time, but Chase and Murray's hostility lingered for more than 4 decades. Part of the reason is that they were so different as people. Chase came from wealth, education, and status, while Murray grew up with far fewer advantages. Their backgrounds shaped how they saw the world and how they approached comedy. Chase's humor was sharp, sarcastic, and often dismissive, while Murray's was chaotic, spontaneous, and sometimes confrontational. Both men had strong egos, and neither liked being overshadowed. When Chase left SNL for movies, Murray stepped into his spot, which automatically created a sense of rivalry. Instead of being supportive, Chase seemed dismissive of Murray's talent. Murray, in return, resented being compared to Chase, and saw him as a symbol of privilege and arrogance. Over the years, this resentment surfaced repeatedly. There were stories of both men refusing to work on projects if the other was involved. Comedy benefits, charity events, and casting meetings often became complicated because organizers had to make sure the two weren't put in the same room. Even decades later, in interviews, Chase continued to make subtle digs at Murray, while Murray hinted at the bitterness without fully letting it go. Their feud wasn't just a short disagreement. It became part of their identities and a shadow that followed them. Throughout their careers, the feud didn't just affect Chase and Murray personally. It also shaped their careers and the larger world of comedy. In the 1980s, both men were household names, starring in some of the biggest comedy films of the decade. Chase was the face of the National Lampoon's vacation series, Fletch, and Caddyshack. Murray starred in Ghostbusters, Groundhog Day, and other classics. But despite their shared success, the idea of them ever working together again was unthinkable. Producers, agents, and directors knew better than to suggest it. This meant that audiences were robbed of what could have been some amazing collaborations. Imagine a buddy comedy, starring both men with their wit and energy. It could have been legendary. Instead, their rivalry closed that door permanently. Within Hollywood, the feud also became a cautionary tale. It showed how personal grudges could derail opportunities and split the industry into camps. Some comedians leaned toward Murray, admiring his scrappy rise and fearless style. Others sided with Chase, respecting his early influence on SNL. Divide became part of comedy history, with fans still debating who was the better comedian decades later. In some ways, the feud gave both men an aura of danger, making them seem larger-than-life figures whose battles were as dramatic as their punchlines. Looking back, the Chase-Murray feud teaches some important lessons about fame, ego, and human nature. Comedy might seem like a world of laughter and fun, but behind the scenes, it can be just as competitive and brutal as any other business. Talent alone doesn't erase insecurities, and success doesn't guarantee happiness. Chase's arrogance came from a mix of privilege and personal pain, while Murray's volatility grew from a lifetime of fighting for recognition. When those personalities collided, the result was explosive. The feud also shows how unresolved conflicts can drag on for years, shaping lives and careers long after the original fight is over. Instead of moving past their differences, both men carried the grudge forward, and it became part of their legacy. For fans, the feud is fascinating. But it's also a reminder that even the funniest people in the world struggle with pride, jealousy, and anger. Had Chase and Murray set aside their egos, they might have created unforgettable comedy together. Instead, they remain symbols of what happens when talent clashes with pride. Their story is less about jokes and more about the human struggle to find respect, belonging, and peace in a competitive world. Even today, the tension between Chase and Murray still lingers in interviews, articles, and fan discussions. While both men have softened slightly with age, neither has fully let go of the bitterness. Chase continues to have a reputation for being difficult, even on later projects like The Show Community. Murray, meanwhile, remains unpredictable, sometimes charming and sometimes combative. Whenever their names come up together, the old stories resurface. reminding fans of that night in 1978 when fists flew backstage at SNL. Their feud has become part of comedy folklore, a tale passed down like a cautionary legend. It proves that, in the entertainment world, personal rivalries can become just as famous as the performances themselves. For younger generations who never saw the original fight, the story still resonates because it touches on something universal: the clash of personalities, the struggle for recognition, and the difficulty of letting go of old grudges. Chase and Murray may never truly reconcile, but their rivalry will always stand as one of the most dramatic stories in comedy history. In the end, both men remain legends, not only for the laughs they gave us, but also for the reminder that even comedy has its dark side. When fans look back at the long feud between Chevy Chase and Bill Murray, one of the most common reactions is to wonder what might have been if the two had set aside their egos. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, both men were at the height of their powers. Chase had already proven he could carry a film, and Murray was becoming one of the most bankable comedy stars in Hollywood. A joint project between them, whether a buddy comedy, a parody film, or even a reunion sketch on SNL, could have been a cultural milestone. Imagine the mix of Chase's calculated sarcasm and Murray's chaotic improvisation. Their contrasting energies might have created a balance that audiences had never seen before. But instead of laughter, the tension between them created silence. Producers avoided pairing them together, studios didn't take the risk, and writers never dared to pitch a collaboration. Even years later, when they were both established icons, the opportunity never came back. By then, their feud had grown into a permanent wall. Murray was still enjoying new career peaks, moving into more dramatic roles like Lost in Translation, while Chase's star had dimmed. The what-if of their missing partnership remains one of comedy's biggest unanswered questions. And perhaps that is part of why the feud is still so fascinating. It represents not just personal conflict, but the lost chance for greatness that fans can only imagine. The Chase-Murray conflict eventually became more than just a personal grudge. It turned into a story that symbolized the clash of personalities in the entertainment industry. Comedy is built on timing, sharpness, and reading people's weaknesses. The very skills that made Chase and Murray successful on stage also made them dangerous to each other in real life. Their feud shows how easily professional respect can turn into rivalry, and how rivalry can harden into bitterness when neither side is willing to bend. It also highlights the way fame magnifies human flaws. In everyday life, two men might exchange insults and move on. But when those men are celebrities, every fight becomes a headline, and every insult becomes a story that fans remember for decades. Today, the feud is often retold, almost like a legend. The night fists flew backstage at SNL. The words that cut too deep. The decades of avoiding each other at industry events. Younger fans, who weren't even alive in the 1970s, still find the story compelling because it feels timeless. It's about pride, insecurity, and the inability to let go, themes that resonate with anyone, not just comedians. Ultimately, the Chase-Murray rivalry is remembered not only for its drama, but also for the lessons it leaves behind. It reminds us that even the most talented people can be undone by their egos, and that sometimes the greatest battles are not on stage but behind the curtain. Their feud may never have a resolution, but its shadow will always linger over comedy history.